Imagine yourself in a place of oppression, where the people are enslaved, without hope, without a future. This bleak scenario is the backdrop to the book of Exodus. Here, God hears the cry of his people and raises up an unlikely deliverer, Moses, to challenge the greatest empire of the time. The story that unfolds is one of the most dramatic and impactful in the Bible, full of miracles, challenges, and, above all, the revelation of a God who liberates. Now, we're going to dive into the depths of Exodus, where we'll see the journey of a people who, through miracles and trials, discover the power and faithfulness of their Creator. Oppression in Egypt and Moses' call, Exodus 1-4. The first chapters of Exodus begin with the oppression of the Israelites in Egypt. A new Pharaoh, who didn't know Joseph, sees the growth of the Hebrew people as a threat. To curb this, he orders that every newborn male be killed. In the midst of this crisis, Moses is born. His mother, trying to save him, puts him in a basket and throws him into the river Nile. By divine providence, he is found by the Pharaoh's daughter and grows up in the palace as a prince. On reaching adulthood, Moses, although raised as an Egyptian, feels the pain of his people. He kills an Egyptian who was mistreating an Israelite and flees to the desert of Midian, where he marries Zipporah and begins a new life as a shepherd. Years pass until, on Mount Horeb, Moses has an encounter with God at the burning bush. God calls him to return to Egypt and free the Israelites from slavery. Moses, initially reluctant, receives miraculous signs to prove that he has been sent by God. Moses confronts Pharaoh and the 10 plagues, Exodus 5-11. Moses returns to Egypt with his brother Aaron and confronts Pharaoh, ordering him to let God's people go and worship in the desert. Pharaoh, however, hardens his heart and refuses. This conflict between Moses and Pharaoh marks the beginning of the 10 plagues that God sends to judge Egypt and its gods. The plagues begin relatively lightly, with the turning of the water of the Nile into blood, followed by an infestation of frogs, lice, flies, plague on animals, ulcers, rain of stones, locusts, and darkness. Each of these plagues hits Egypt, but spares the land of Goshen, where the Israelites lived, highlighting the distinction between God's people and the Egyptians. However, even in the face of such catastrophes, Pharaoh remained adamant, refusing to free the slaves. The 10th and final plague would be the most devastating: the death of all the firstborn in Egypt, both human and animal. This plague would not only break Pharaoh's pride, but also pave the way for the liberation of the Israelites. Quick pause. If you're finding this discussion valuable, you'll love our ebook, Faith and Finances, The Biblical Guide to Wealth. It dives deeper into the principles of faith and finance directly from the Bible, offering practical insights to help you thrive spiritually and financially. Grab your copy today by clicking the link in the description or in the first pinned comment, and start transforming your financial journey with biblical wisdom. Passover and Liberation, Exodus 12-15. The 10th plague introduces one of the most significant events in the Israelite faith, Passover. God instructs the Israelites to sacrifice a lamb and mark their doors with its blood, so that the destroying angel would pass over their homes during the night when the firstborn would be killed. This Passover ceremony would be celebrated for generations as a reminder of God's deliverance. That same night, Pharaoh, devastated by the death of his own son, finally gives in. He orders Moses and the Israelites to leave Egypt immediately. The departure is hasty, and the people leave in a hurry, without having time to leaven their bread. They carry with them the wealth of the Egyptians, who willingly give away their possessions, anxious for the Israelites to leave the land. The journey to freedom begins, but not without challenges. Pharaoh, his heart once again hardened, changes his mind and pursues the Israelites with his army. They find themselves trapped in front of the Red Sea. At that moment, God performs one of the greatest miracles in the Bible. He opens the sea, allowing the people to cross on dry feet. When the Egyptians try to follow, the waters return and drown the entire army. This act of deliverance becomes an eternal symbol of God's power over oppressive forces. In the desert, trials and provision, Exodus 16-18. Now free from Egypt, the Israelites begin their journey through the desert towards Mount Sinai. However, freedom does not mean the absence of challenges. Soon, the people began to complain about the lack of food and water. In response, God shows his care by sending manna, the bread from heaven, daily to feed the people. He also instructs Moses to strike a rock so that water would flow from it. During this phase, the Israelites face other difficulties, including an attack by the Amalekites. Moses, with the help of Joshua, leads the people into battle, and once again, God grants them victory, showing that, even in the most difficult situations, he is on the side of his people. Moses also finds himself overwhelmed with leading the people, and it is at this point that his father-in-law, Jethro, offers him some wise advice. Delegate responsibilities to trusted men to judge the smaller issues, while Moses would take care of the more serious matters. The covenant at Mount Sinai and the 10 Commandments, Exodus 19-24. After their journey through the desert, the Israelites arrive at Mount Sinai. It is here that God begins a new relationship with his people, establishing a covenant that would shape Israel's identity as a nation. Moses climbs the mountain to meet God, while the people stand around in awe at the sound of thunder, lightning, and the presence of a dense cloud. At the top of the mountain, God hands Moses the 10 Commandments, a set of fundamental principles that reflected the divine character and moral standard expected of his people. These laws were not merely regulations. They were the basis of the relationship between God and Israel, serving to establish justice and a holy way of life. In addition to the 10 Commandments, God provides further instructions on how to live in community, addressing issues related to social justice, the protection of the vulnerable, and appropriate worship. Moses then comes down from the mountain and shares these laws with the people, who readily agree to follow every word the Lord has commanded. To seal the covenant, Moses performs a sacrifice and sprinkles the blood on the people, a symbolic act that ratifies the mutual commitment between God and the Israelites. This moment at Sinai is monumental, as it formally establishes Israel as God's chosen people, a nation with a sacred mission. Instructions for the tabernacle and the priesthood, Exodus 25-31. After establishing the covenant, God gave Moses detailed instructions about building the tabernacle, the place where God's presence would dwell among the people. The tabernacle would be the center of worship and sacrifices, reflecting God's holiness and majesty. The instructions are precise, showing that every aspect of the tabernacle was to be built according to the heavenly pattern that God had revealed to Moses. The materials used in the tabernacle were to be valuable and symbolic, such as gold, silver, and fine fabrics. The purpose was to create a place worthy of God's presence, where the people could worship and be reconciled with God through sacrifices. In addition to the tabernacle, God also gave guidelines for the making of the priestly garments, which were to be worn by Aaron and his sons, who were assigned to the sacred service. These garments symbolized purity and consecration, and the high priest in particular would have a crucial role as mediator between God and the people. The garments included the breastplate with the 12 stones representing the tribes of Israel, the ephod, and the mitre, each with a spiritual purpose. God also established the Sabbath as a sign of the covenant between him and Israel, emphasizing the importance of resting and keeping this day holy. The Sabbath was more than just a physical rest. It was a continual reminder that God was the Creator and the Deliverer, and that the people should trust in him in all things. Quick pause. If you're finding this discussion valuable, you'll love our ebook, Faith and Finances, The Biblical Guide to Wealth. It dives deeper into the principles of faith and finance directly from the Bible, offering practical insights to help you thrive spiritually and financially. Grab your copy today by clicking the link in the description or in the first pinned comment, and start transforming your financial journey with biblical wisdom. The Golden Calf and the Renewal of the Covenant, Exodus 32-34. While Moses remained on Mount Sinai for 40 days, the people, impatient, asked Aaron to make a god who could go before them. Giving in to the pressure, Aaron made a golden calf and presented it to the people, who began to worship it and celebrate around it. This act of idolatry marks a critical moment in Israel's history, when the people, recently freed from slavery, are already turning away from the true God. God, seeing the people's sin, warns Moses and declares that he is ready to destroy them. Moses, however, intercedes on behalf of the people, appealing to God's mercy and to the promises made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God hears Moses' intercession and decides to spare the Israelites. On coming down from the mountain and seeing the people worshipping the golden calf, Moses breaks the tablets of the 10 Commandments in a symbolic act of breaking the covenant. He confronts Aaron and the Israelites for their betrayal, and, in an act of purification, the Levites are called to punish the idolaters. After this event, Moses again goes up to Mount Sinai to seek the renewal of the covenant. God, in His grace, agrees to renew the covenant and to give the tablets of the law again. During this new ascent of the mountain, Moses asks to see God's glory, and God reveals His goodness, mercy, and justice. Moses descends with his face shining from his proximity to the divine glory, a visible sign of the renewal of the covenant and of God's forgiveness. The construction of the tabernacle, Exodus 35-40. With the renewal of the covenant and the new tablets of the law, the focus of the last chapters of Exodus turns to the construction of the tabernacle. Moses calls on the people to bring voluntary offerings, including gold, silver, fine cloth, and wood, so that the materials needed for the construction can be gathered. The response from the people is abundant, to the point that Moses has to ask them to stop bringing more offerings. The leadership of this construction is entrusted to Bezalel and Aholiab, skilled craftsmen who are empowered by the Spirit of God to carry out the work with excellence. Together, they lead the team in creating each piece of the tabernacle exactly according to the instructions God gave Moses. Every detail, from the outer courtyard to the Holy of Holies, is assembled with precision and holiness, reflecting the seriousness of preparing a worthy place for the divine presence to dwell. The tabernacle is divided into 2 main parts: the holy place, which contained the lampstand, the table of showbread, and the altar of incense, and the Holy of Holies, which housed the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark was the most sacred item, as it represented God's presence among His people. The lid of the Ark, called the mercy seat, had 2 golden cherubs with outstretched wings, symbolizing God's glory. When the tabernacle was completed, Moses inspected all the work and saw that it had been done exactly as the Lord had commanded. The book of Exodus closes with a powerful climax. God's presence descends in the form of a cloud and fills the tabernacle. The glory of the Lord is so intense that not even Moses can enter. The cloud remains over the tabernacle, guiding the Israelites on their journey through the desert. When the cloud rose, the people marched, and when it stopped, they camped. This powerful ending to Exodus reflects the fulfillment of God's promises to be with His people. The tabernacle becomes a visible symbol that God is not only the deliverer, but also the one who dwells among His own, guiding and protecting them at every step of their journey. The book of Exodus is undoubtedly an epic narrative that goes beyond the liberation of a people from physical slavery. It is the story of a nation being formed and forged through miracles, trials, and direct encounters with God. From the first chapters, where the people cry out in the midst of oppression, to the final moments, when God's glory fills the tabernacle, we see God's hand in every detail. Exodus is more than just a story of physical deliverance. It is the revelation of God as the deliverer, provider, and sanctifier of His people. Throughout the plagues, the open waters, the laws given, and the building of the tabernacle, God reveals Himself as sovereign over all nations, faithful to His promises and deeply interested in dwelling among those who worship Him. This itinerary that we present, covering the 40 chapters, brings to light the journey of a people who learn to trust God in the midst of the unknown. The book of Exodus is not just about Israel's past, but an eternal reminder to all generations that God hears, acts, and never abandons His people. May this video inspire its viewers to understand the power and depth of this story, leading them to reflect on God's role in their own lives. Thank you for watching. If you found this video insightful, please give it a thumbs up and share it with others who might benefit. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more discussions on how to live out your faith in today's world. Let's continue to grow together in truth and grace. Ebook, Faith and Finances, The Biblical Guide to Wealth. It dives deeper into the principles of faith and finance directly from the Bible, offering practical insights to help you thrive spiritually and financially. Grab your copy today by clicking the link in the description or in the first pinned comment, and start transforming your financial journey with biblical wisdom.